Let's talk about making your game fit different resolutions dynamically. Alright, so to do this is going to be very simple, but I'm going to hopefully show you the differences and why you would want to use one option over another. And one of the main things is all of your HUD, your GUI, right? Your heads-up display. I'm having a brain fart on what GUI stands for. Something user interface, but point is, all of that should be inside of a canvas layer. That way we don't have to really work with anything with the anchors and that to begin with. Now, anchors can be important. I'll show you right here with the coins spot here. For example, if our anchors were in the top right corner and not the top left, and we were to go ahead and play the scene, we take a look at it, you can see as it, well, initially, you can see how it moves with our window, which is great. But its distance is purely based off of the top right corner and not the top left. So you can see where issues can come up with that. So that's where you, of course, play with your anchors. You can maybe do both top left and right corners, and we take a look. And that works. It's much better. And it's not jumping all over the place. It's nicer than that. But the point is, we don't really need to do something like that when you're making a game. These anchors are better if we just put them in an application, right? Maybe something that we're making for the desktop or we're making for mobile. The canvas layer is more so what we're going to use for our HUD and GUI, and we're going to take these control elements and stick them inside of that canvas layer, like you're seeing here on the left hand side with the in the tree here. Now, I did not make this game. This is just something that I grabbed off of the asset library or the asset projects. I don't know where I was going with that first one, but this is just something that I grabbed off of there. And you can see by default, it works. We can play it. Cool. We're pretty zoomed in with this. And you can see we're overlapped with the HUD. It doesn't look great. So just by looking at this out of the box, we would want to change the settings that I'm gonna show you here in a moment. Anyway, what you can see with this, we're super zoomed in, even though it may not be what we want. If we pull up to the side, great, we're seeing more of the screen. If we go up top, we are seeing more. So you can see that though this does work, kind of, it really, your HUD doesn't respect anything with this. Alright, so if maybe we're playing on a smaller screen, maybe we're playing on a really old device, whatever, playing 4x3, this isn't usable really at all for any of this. So you can see with the default settings that Godot has, this is not gonna play well. Different resolutions as we go about it. So what are the options that we have for this? Well, for this, we go up to project settings, and this is where we're going to look at stretch for the mode and aspect primarily. Now, mode is set to disabled by default, but you would look at canvas items and viewport. These are two different options. They do similar things. If I just hold my mouse over here over the mode, we can get a documentation description here. Now, disabled is mainly meant for applications. Like I was mentioning, this is where anchors are going to be an important factor, which is, since it's on disabled by default, that is why we saw the coins in that. There are 1 giant, 2 overlapping with the player, 3 kind of covering the whole screen. And then we have 2 other options, canvas item and viewport. Now, both of these do similar type things when it comes to scaling. However, they do have their small differences here, and what it's basically going to come down to is if you're doing a pixel art game, use viewport, and if you're doing an HD game like this one here, then you would use canvas items. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to use canvas items for that. And we can see just by making that one change here, we can see this is already miles better in terms of the visuals and its playability. I'm just going to come up here so we can see that easier without it blending into the back. So we see that is already far superior visually. The corner is actually being the corner, right? It's actually respecting that canvas layer. And we can actually see everything that's going around us. None of that stuff really... We never really had any of that when we were in the other mode with this set to disabled. Now, this also has keep set by default for its aspect. And as you can see, it's going to keep that 16:9 aspect ratio no matter what. And if I were to full screen this, because I have an ultra wide monitor, and there are many games that do this and that leave it like this. But we're going to have this pillbox. I know you can only see the one side, but we have these big black bars on both the left and the right because it is a 16:9 game. And because of its aspect is set on keep, it's going to keep that 16:9 aspect ratio as we go about this. So, and like I said, there are some games that keep it like this. It's really developer choice. So this isn't totally out of the norm if you wanted to stop right here, but I wouldn't say this is necessarily respecting all monitor resolutions. Now 16:9 is still the dominant aspect ratio at the current time. I just gotta bring this back up for that 16:9 there. So, but it's still the dominant situation. So that's fine if you wanted to keep it like that. Most people have only like a 1080p or even if they go 1440p, it's usually still that same aspect of 16:9. Ultra wide does have popularity, and a lot of times there will be maybe a launch parameter or not launch parameter, but also we can look at some of these tools and external programs for enabling some widescreen hacks or modifying, creating a modified binary of your executable, mods to enable widescreen. So there is enough people that this community, I guess you can say, does exist, and people do want their full monitors taken up whenever possible. So if you wanted to do that, then we have to come in, take a look again in our project settings, and we're looking at aspect here. Now, it's set by keep by default, and an option that we could do is ignore. And if we did that, we're going to have two things. One, it fills up the whole screen. Great. However, if we just look up here at these coins, right? These coins here on the right side, or even right here in about the middle, we can see they're kind of square shaped here, as they should be. This is the normal resolution and everything that it should be. And when we were to go to a 21:9 aspect ratio, right, something bigger than the 16:9, we can see they're not really square anymore. They're kind of stretching out in the width, right, horizontally, to almost form more of a rectangle outline. And hopefully that checks out. Again, if we take a look at our player, we can see that he's kind of stretched out a bit. We're getting that more of a rectangle look in the horizontal. And if we go back down to the proper aspect ratio, he's an actual square, is what he should be. So this is an option that some games have gone with, and it's not great, but you could do it. As you saw, it's a very minor stretching, but once you notice it, it could be a little annoying for some people. But that's an option, and that's what you would have with ignore. And of course, if somebody had, 32:9 or 48:9 or one of those super ridiculous monitors, they would have something like this, right? Those absolute ridiculous aspect ratios that are a little nutty. And you can see how much everything just gets super stretched. Even the UI there is being stretched out a bit, it looks like. So these are an option, and you can see if we were to just transfer this over to maybe a mobile device, portrait, we can see the UI is completely squished, and we got the opposite effect going on, right? The squares are, or the coins now are becoming less in the player, less of a square, and now they're becoming a rectangle again, but vertically instead of horizontally. So ignore is an option, but you're going to have to deal with that stretching and less, I guess you could say, native compatibility with different resolutions. Now, keep width and keep height is going along the same lines of keep, only of course we're working with either the height or the width specifically. So I believe I just set on keep width or keep height, whichever, right? And you can see that basically it's going to say, hey, you're always going to have, if the resolution doesn't line up, you're always going to have pillbox, or you're always going to have a letterbox, right? So that way, bring it in. Keep clicking that one out of habit. We come in, right? So we see the width, it's going out just as we want, but as soon as it doesn't match up on height, we're getting that letterbox. So if I were to go in full screen here, in this case, it looks like it's actually going to fill up for me in this situation, a little strangely, but that's where you're getting things like letterbox and pillbox again with that keep. This is just going along either the height or basing it off of the height or width in that case, whereas keep is using both height and width, which is what we saw in the beginning where we got the pillbox and letterbox going on. Now, if you want to support as many resolutions as you want natively, or just by default here, whatever, you can go with expand, and that is going to, if we take a look, we can see the game runs perfectly fine. It looks normal here. If we stretch out along our width, we can see the only thing that changed is we can see more of our screen, right? More and less of our screen. And we can go the same thing when we go wide or tall. The only difference is we're seeing more of our screen. So if we go full screen, the only thing different is we're seeing, again, more of our screen, but everything is working out perfectly fine, as you would kind of hope. Can we get up? We couldn't make it. But everything, this is what I would go with if you just wanted to support as much as possible with your game. Again, either canvas or viewport, depending on what you're doing, and expand. Now, what you're seeing over there is, I guess you can call, quote-unquote, side effect of this, where you're seeing more of the level than maybe the developer intended, since the majority of people are 16:9. They're never going to pass this, the green mark, right? That could be an unintended side effect that goes in there. But you see our UI, it is going to increase in size a bit, which again is just kind of adapting in this case to our monitor resolution, or the resolution of the window, the game, right? Whatever we're going with. So if you want it to be as dynamic as possible with the most resolutions, I would go with expand for the aspect, personally. And then either viewport for pixel art or canvas item for HD. And again, I can show you that. We can take a look at like disabled here. Right? Whoops. And we kind of get that, but it kind of works here at larger resolutions, but it kind of fails the smaller you get. And that's just kind of why it typically goes with my mind's kind of blanking here, desktop applications, or you would probably set a minimum size for it and then have like 720p as like maybe the minimum for your game to run or whatever, listed as a requirement. But point is, these are the two options that you need to look at if you want your game to run on different resolutions without issue. And again, you can take a look at looking at things like scale, for example. If you want to expose that to the user to scale the HUD, the UI, this is what you would allow them to do. This is the slider you would allow them to tweak. And then scale mode, fractional or integer, completely up to you. I can just leave my mouse on that. You can take a look. You want to read that, pause it, whatever. That's up to you. But it's kind of running in circles at this point. So those are the main two things you want to look at: mode and aspect. So with that, I'm just gonna leave that here. Take care. Have yourselves a good one, and I'll see you guys next week.